Good afternoon. So I am, my name is Ruben Degollado. I am the Director of State Improvement Initiatives and ESSA Compliance. And my role here at Region 1 is I work two parts. One, on the state improvement initiatives, I do school improvement, working with campus principals, assistant superintendents, curriculum, et cetera. And then I also work with ESSA Compliance on the federal program side. So Ms. Reese asked me to share a little bit about Title I Part A. And everything I'm going to cover today is in accordance with Title I Part A. It's not on any other of the entitlements. All entitlements have their own rules. The rules I'm sharing right now are on Title I Part A. So our agenda is to talk about the use of funds, how does carryover work with Title I Part A, and then how do amendments work. So first of all, allowable use of funds. I'm going to cover what Title I Part A means. And so just the big idea here with Title I Part A, I know that in the past, we've always conceptualized Title I Part A as being supplemental. I mean, we're all familiar with that term, supplement, not supplant. However, when it comes to Title I Part A, when they're using the newer methodology for supplementing, not supplanting with Title I Part A, has to do with how you fund campuses. So I know this is not on the slide, and I'll get into allowable costs, but in essence, if I have two campuses, if I have Ms. Romalda Ruiz Elementary, and I have Ruben Degollado Elementary, Ruiz Elementary is not Title I, but Degollado Elementary is Title I. I'm not going to give Degollado Elementary less state and local funds because that would be an issue of supplanting. That's how they look at it. It is not per expenditure. All, not all, but many things are allowable under Title I Part A, and I'll go over those things that are here. Okay, so I'm not going to read all of these. The PowerPoint is there for your reference. However, you'll see that there is a wide amount of flexibility when it comes to Title I Part A and school-wide programs. You'll see training, dual concurrent enrollment, transportation, tuition, books, all kinds of things are allowable when it comes to Title I Part A. Now, when it comes to Title I Part A, these are the main things that you need to question or go into understanding when someone wants to spend Title I Part A. And again, I'm not talking about all ESSA programs. This is unique to Title I Part A. The first one is the campus in question needs to be a Title I Part A school-wide program campus. And for the most part, we are 100% of our campuses are Title I Part A school-wide. We do have some campuses that do not have Title I Part A, but the other kind of Title I Part A program is targeted assistance, and I don't believe we have any of those last time I checked. Okay, so first one is that. Number two, LEAs must have a valid supplement, not supplant methodology for allocating state and local funds to campuses or a statement of exemption. And that's a whole other training, but essentially, if you have all of your campuses are Title I Part A school-wide, you should have a statement of exemption on file because those do get randomly validated and we assist with those. Or if you are a small district and you do not have any campuses that have the same grade levels, for instance, you only have one elementary, one middle school, one high school, you would also be exempt in that situation. So that's what I mentioned earlier is that supplement, not supplant methodology, is that you're funding all of your campuses with state and local funds equitably and as if there is the absence of Title I Part A. 3, LEA should ensure that activities and the resources are identified in the CNA. And that is all of these are very important. But when it comes to Title I Part A, it has to be an identified need. Prior to encumbering, prior to obligating funds, it has to be in the CNA. Don't make the mistake of what some districts, not in Region 1, of course, I've heard urban legends of these things happening, where they buy something and they say, oh, you know what, we bought it. Hey, go make sure it's in the CNA, go put it in there. That doesn't happen here, of course, but that's the kind of thing where your CNA is going to precede the expenditure. So it's in the comprehensive needs assessment, and that includes district CNA or campus CNA, wherever the expenditure is occurring. Second one is included in the school-wide program plan, or district plan, campus improvement plan. And there's two things that need to be included in there: how the activity resources identified will be evaluated, how the needs of students at risk of not meeting state standards are being met. And number two is very important. The agency, Texas Education Agency, and the feds place a high level of importance on that second one, is that you're meeting the needs of students at risk of not meeting state standards. And then the other one, and I organized this one, those of you in Zoom land, you're not seeing, but I'm pointing. Well, I thought I had a pointer here, but you see a better way to remember the next four bullets. I like to remember Rana. It's easy. You can draw a picture of a little frog. RANA, is it reasonable, allocable, necessary, and allowable? Those are the big ones. So reasonable, and in reasonable terms, they always give the example, if I'm buying computers, I'm buying computers for a Word program or for a reading program in a class, and the teacher comes and says, I need these $5,000 computers with 30-inch screen. And these could be working at NASA. These computers are so great, and they need it for reading and Word. Okay, is that reasonable? Están comiendo over here, but no. Hypothetical, that's not reasonable. Same request: computers, $5,000, high processing power, big screens. The CTE teacher that's doing computer aided design comes to you with those. Is that reasonable? So that in that case, that would be a reasonable expenditure, and I'm just giving you an example. So necessary to carry out the intent and purpose of the Title I Part A program. Again, Title I Part A program is tied to that number 2. The Roman numeral 2 is how the needs of students are being met that are not meeting state standards. Allocable, meaning you've budgeted for it, it is in the grant application. And then allowable, it's an allowable expenditure, and I have a list of what those things are. You meet all the EDGAR requirements, you're following all district policies and procedures, okay? So when someone comes and they says, can we buy this with Title I? This is your go-to handout. This is what we share with your federal programs directors. Many, many things are allowable that people don't even think are allowable with Title I, provided you are following these steps. So when they ask me, I say, let's go to the pager, and I always share this document right there. Okay, eligible school shall develop a comprehensive plan. This is where it's at in statute. This is also where it's at in statute about having a CNA and a CIP. I'm not going to read that. You're going to see that that's there, CIP, a campus improvement plan, CNA, etc. Okay, the CNA, I'll just say this, there's a lot of words on here, but I'll just say the CNA must be completed prior to applying for the funding. So that campus planning, that is occurring in the spring, early summer perhaps, but right even now, early spring, late spring, that's when you're seeing those things happen. So some payroll costs, unallowable costs. These are some things that are unallowable, and this is from the most recent document that we have. And it's not even very recent, but this is the most recent one they have. I think it was in 2015, but it hasn't changed. Payroll costs not allowed. Personal liability insurance. This is Title I Part A, of course. Employer contributions to voluntary retirement plans. Substitute pay for private nonprofit school teachers. Payroll costs that exceed local policy. Okay, now that's not to mean that stipends, extra duty pay, those things are separate, but what we're saying is payroll costs that are exceeding the local policy that are outside of those stipends, etc. Okay, Title I Part A funds for 6,200 expenditures, This is the first one. I want to make sure that everyone is clear on this one. A consultant shall not be used in the conduct of this application if the services to be rendered by such consultant could have been rendered by the grant's employees. So what that essentially means is paying, what some districts will do is they will pay a consultant to do their grant application, okay? What does it say? It says if an employee can do it, and basically an employee should be able to do it. But this really pertains to some of our small districts. Some of our small districts don't have federal program directors in their budgets, so that would not pertain to them in that case. Training or technical assistance on grant writing or obtaining grant funds, not allowable for 62. Fundraising activities or training on fundraising, multicolor printing costs that are not reasonable and necessary, legal retainer fees, tuition and fees for courses not directly related to the grant program, and I won't read all of them. They're there for your reference. Okay, 6,300. Any supplies and materials for personal use must be used only for grant-related activities. Of course, you're going to follow your own local policies on those. Costs associated with awards, banquets, ceremonies, celebrations, and social events. Cell phones for personal use. These are things that are, you're going to use your local funds. And let me tell you the last one here. Okay. Souvenirs, memorabilia, or promotional items such as T-shirts, caps, tote bags, keychains, or imprinted pens. And I know we love swag. We love shiny objects in our school districts. We like to have these cool things. We buy the shirts and all that. But when you put your district logo on such items, okay, that becomes a promotional item. So that is not allowable. Now, here's a question that comes at me, has come at me before. Okay, we need pencils for testing. The vendor has asked me, can we buy these pencils? Yes, they can buy pencils. But here's the catch. They're going to have our district logo on them. The vendor told me that they can put it in for free. That what they're charging us is for the pencils. Is that a good move? No. You more than anyone know that if you have to defend such a cost, pues it was free. Hello? No, you don't want to be in a case where you're actually having to defend that cost. You're going to use local funds, and you're going to buy the plain old Dixon Ticonderoga pencils with those federal funds, not ones that have a district logo on them. Okay, 6,400. I won't read out of those. I did highlight some in red. However, okay, so souvenirs, memorabilia, promotional items, other fun door prizes. Okay. I know oftentimes people get enthusiastic and say, we need door prizes, we need student recognition, things like that. Those things, local funds, are you going to use those? Okay, 64, it may shock you, but alcoholic beverages are not included, cannot be purchased with title funds. Okay, and I'm sure the lunch that if you came here today, was not purchased with federal funds. Local funds, right? I'm sure. Okay. Tips, gratuities, anytime people go and buy meals, the tips and gratuities are not a part of that. Entertainment, recreation, first class airfare, again, reasonable, necessary. Any costs that are not reasonable, necessary to meet the objectives of the grant. Costs related to training or technical assistance on grant writing or obtaining funds. Okay. And then just this one always trips people up. Field trips under new Edgar only allowed with pre-approval and grant application by Department of Ed. TEAs awaiting guidance on whether they can pre-approve. But as you all know, should you use federal funds for field trips? Can you? You could justify it, but there is a pre-approval process that, along with that. And of course, there has to be tied to CNA and all those other things with educational purposes. Okay, capital outlay is there. Okay, carryover. Everybody say 15%. If your mouth is not full at this moment, say 50%. 15% online. You probably said it at near your computer. Thank you for that. The LEA is limited by statute to carry over into the following fiscal year no more than 15% of its Title I Part A entitlement. Again, this is for Title I Part A. Note that any funds transferred into Title I Part A program through funding transferability will be included in the total amount used to calculate Title I Part A carryover to determine if the LEA has exceeded the 15% statutory limitation. And if you're not familiar with what funding transferability is, some programs like Title II, Title IV Part A, you have the option of, if you have a certain amount of money in Title II, Title IV, when you do the grant application, you can do what's called transferability. You can put that money into Title I Part A, and it can work there. However, it's still going to be factored into the calculation, as I mentioned, okay? The only exception with this is the percentage limitation does not apply to an LEA receiving a Title I Part A entitlement that is less than $50,000 for any fiscal year. And that would be for, again, for one of our small districts. So what happens if we don't? If we do carry over, okay? This is what happens. Once every 3 years, the LEA may be granted a waiver of this limitation through, there's a schedule, WV 4001. Staff in the grants administration at TEA will determine whether their carryover amount will exceed the limit amount allowed and will apply the statutory waiver if it's available. If the LEA has used the statutory waiver, and I'm reading these word for word because this one's very important. It's all important, right? But this one is particularly so. If the LEA has used the statutory waiver in the past 2 years, staff will check to see if the LEA meets the requirements for the EdFlex statewide programmatic waiver. Any necessary documents will be initiated by grants division. Okay. If the waiver is not available, and if the LEA experienced an increase in Title I between the initial planning amount and the final allocation amount, the LEA may be granted an EdFlex waiver through Schedule WV 4001. Now, basically, if you get into this situation where you're exceeding that 15%, your federal program director will basically need to reach out to their grant negotiator. They will work with you because essentially TEA wants the funds to be spent. I mean, that's at the end of the day, we all want the funds to be spent. So they will work with you. All right. So those are some items there. Any questions in the chat or in the room so far?
No questions, Ruben.
Yeah, Rana, that's a great one. Remember it. Like I said, put a little picture of your frog right by your computer. And when they come in and they say, you know, they bring their little shopping cart, can we buy this? Can we take the kids here? Just pull out the frog and say, is it reasonable, allowable, necessary, allocable? It makes a lot of sense. Okay. Other items for carryover, although an LEA may not use carryover funds to provide services to an ineligible campus, the LEA does have considerable discretion in handling its carryover funds. So these are just some options. I won't read these bullet for bullet, but these are some options when you have carryover. Now, just speaking of carryover, very recently, there's been some discussion here on amending grants, and I'll get into that on the next slide. Okay, because every year, what TEA does is they will reallocate those funds. They'll look at, see what's left over. You get a reallocation. Your federal program director has to amend the grant, and then you go from there. And these are some things that you have in consideration of those carryover. Other item that's very important to understand is, let's say the LEA received Title I allocation that exceeded 500,000, and as required, if you have an allocation of over 500,000, you are required at the district level to reserve 1% of your allocation for parent and family engagement. Now, let's say they did not obligate all of the money by September 30th. They must use a portion of this carryover funds equal to the unobligated amount for parent and family engagement, in addition to its current year's reservation. Now, look at what it says in the parentheses. If an LEA reserved more than 1% and already obligated an amount equal to 1%, then it need not use any of its carryover funds for this purpose. So main thing to understand is that when you're working with your reservation here, that you are reserving. If you have 500,000, you're reserving 1% of the allocation for that. But by that portion, by the middle piece where it says use a portion of its Title I carryover funds equal to the unobligated amount. So you're keeping with that portion. Okay, so here's an example. For example, an LEA with a Title I allocation of 10 million reserved 100,000 to meet the requirements. If the LEA only obligated 90%, or excuse me, 90,000 of the 100,000, in addition to reserving 1% of its fiscal year 22, allocation for parent and family engagement must also assign 10,000 of its carryover funds to this activity. In other words, the 10,000 carryover from FFY 2021 fiscal year would be in addition to that reservation in 22. Clear as mud? Okay, I'm going really fast. Okay, amendments. So we're in that season. How many of you you're done with your amendment? Okay, if you're done with your amendment, get a second serving of whatever's back there, pasta or something, pat yourself on the back, get another dessert, good job. Some of us are still doing amendments. I'm still working. We have amendments here at Region 1 as well. But with the amendment, you can rebudget within the approved direct costs to meet unanticipated requirements. So one of the things to consider is as you're going to amend, you're going to talk to, and this is like off of the slides here, but say, were there any other needs? Okay, and I can give you an example. Let's say a district, they decided, they came to an agreement, they did a CNA, they put it in their CIP, they need to send a bunch of people to training, okay? But there's no money left in the training budget, right? So then that district, they're gonna decide they're gonna put the whatever carryover funds they have, they're gonna reallocate it to that. Another way of looking at it is what some districts will do is they'll say, okay, we spent 20%, or we allocated 20% of our funds to 6,200. We did 70% to 6,100, primarily in payroll. Then what they will do is they'll say, okay, what's 70% of the additional amount? So let's say the additional amount is 10,000. We'll put 70% of whatever we put, because we did it for payroll. We're going to put 70% of the additional there. So those are just different ways of looking at it. Some changes do require prior written approval through an amendment. Regardless of whether an amendment is required, you must comply with any requirements for maximum or minimum expenditures. This example, if the grant requires that no more than 25% of the funds may be used for a certain activity, the grant must comply with this 25% maximum requirement. Now, I'm going to give you a pop quiz. Okay. What is the percentage if you're going to, you're going to do your local budget amendment? What's the percentage of your total entitlement? What's that number that will necessitate you to do an amendment in the grant application? Who said 25%, sir? Do you have prizes, ma'am, for these non-locally or non-federally funded prizes? Boom, right there. Yeah. Right here, David, Mr. David in the front. Okay, give him a prize or something. You just 25%, sir. Thank you. 25%. So if you, you readjust things, it cannot exceed that 25%. If it exceeds it, then you need to amend it. Okay. This, we have a link to this. This is a game changer, this document. If you're not familiar with it, and I'm mainly speaking to our our new CFOs, I'm sure many of you are aware of this document, but it really tells you when do I amend. Okay. Now, if I don't have payroll, and all of a sudden we're saying, okay, we need to have payroll in this grant, Title I Part A, but we don't, I mean, that would probably be shocking that you don't have payroll, but let's say that's the case. At that point, you would need to do what? You would need to initiate that amendment. Okay. Here's another thing. Another thing to understand is kind of like you have to plan backwards, like if, for summer school positions, all these other things, those are considerations there. Okay, so there's a whole list, adding line items, increasing the number of payroll positions, adding type of payroll position, it's all there, whether or not you need to amend that. Okay, and you all know the difference between formula funded grant and discretionary competitive grants. Everybody know the difference? Okay. Formula, throw out an example in the room. What's a formula funded grant? Title I. Are you going to get Title I Part A every year? I mean, Lord willing, right? You're going to get Title I Part A every year. Okay. Teacher incentive allotment. That's competitive, right? So some may win, some may, well, I don't want to say lose, but some may not get the grant because it is a competitive discretionary grant. Okay, other ones, I'll give you an example of a discretionary non-competitive grant, McKinney-Vento. There is a McKinney-Vento grant. Everyone will get it if they just apply for it. It's not a lot, but that would be an example of a discretionary non-competitive grant. So when we're talking about Title I, we're talking about ESSA programs. It's the first column of formula funded grant. Okay, amendments must be submitted to TEA by the last amendment due date. I don't have that date in front of me, but typically it is, I want to say June 2nd. So that's kind of the date. You got to get all that in before June 2nd. If you don't get it in before June 2nd, that amendment is not going to go through. And don't like 100% quote on that, but I'm more than like 80% sure it is June 2nd is the date. So, but check per grant application because some of them have differences. Go to the TEA grant opportunities page to see where that's at. Okay, to submit a grant amendments, you go into the TEA login TEAL. You go into the grant system. Okay, now your grantee manager, they can do the work. They can put all the numbers in. It's not hard to do. But the person who submits the amendment is the grantee official. They must certify and submit it electronically. Typically, that is your superintendent, your assistant superintendent. Those are the ones that are doing that, that piece right there. Okay. All amendments are subject to negotiation. And what I want to say is, if you get a negotiation note, nobody's in trouble. That's a part of the process. They have questions sometimes, like if you are taking money out completely, they'll have a question there. Are you sure you want to do this? Is that how you want to handle it? It's just a part of the process. I remember when I first did my first grant, I got a negotiation. I thought the world was ending. I thought like, oh my gosh, what did I do? I need to go talk to my supervisor. TA's mad at me. You know, I didn't know the whole process, but it's just a part of that whole process. Okay. The amendment must be approved by TEA before any activities occur. So if you amend your grant, and I'm going to just give you an example. Let's say you're going to amend your grant and you're going to create a position, you're going to pay somebody. Don't start that position. Don't post it, all that other process until it is approved and you get your NOGA back. Because what does it say? An amendment must be approved by TEA before any activities occur. If the subgrantee chooses to implement such changes prior to the amendment being approved by TEA, the subgrantee will be responsible for paying from other fund sources any costs not approved during negotiations. Nobody wants that, right? You don't want to give back money. So make sure it is approved first, and it is approved when you get the NOGA.
Ruben, we've got a question in the chat.
Okay, what is the question?
Are there any exceptions on use of Title I Part A funds for parent and family engagement?
Food. I mean, I'm oversimplifying it, but the one that people ask about is food a lot of times. Okay, and I'll give you the example. There's a parental involvement meeting, and what do we want? What do we always want to do when the parents come? We want to give them food because I'm not going to say who said it, but let's put it a different way. We will increase participation if we have food, right? It will improve program objectives by having higher attendance of stakeholder engagement. I see. That's how you say it. Now, the example with that, is it allowable? If it is allowable, if you can show that without, in the absence of that food, the parents wouldn't have come. But what did I say earlier? Do you want to be in a position where you're having to defend an expenditure? No, you do not. So is it allowable? It is under that very strict guideline that that to meet program objectives. We have data that show with no food, no one came. With empanadas, 50% more came. When we served tacos, we had 100% attendance. I mean, come on. Are we going to play that game? That's just best practice that, you don't want to be in a position where you're going to defend it. That's what local funds are for. Now, so as far as expenses go, that's one. Another expense is, can we send parents to a conference? Yes, you can, but you have to understand that there's forms to fill out, and the form is called the participant support cost. It is a form that is in the Edgar, the Smart Sheet Edgar guideline or for a portal. That one, it's in there. It's a participant support cost. So hopefully those are just two examples. Okay. And then everything else that I said, as far as memorabilia, awards, prizes, door prizes, all these other things, anything that's unallowable on those other object items that I showed you, those are going to be unallowable for parental involvement. Question.
So with our policy being updated, it's requiring that we advertise on our website every award that we get regarding federal programs. It's something new. It just got passed at our board meeting. But when we're adopting the budget, we used to have our federal programs just as a information piece for our board. The official budget did not include federal programs. So my question is, what is the guidance that's available for school districts so that we ensure that we're doing that correctly this coming August? Is there, like with the general fund, there's that function fund level approval that if you switch from one function to another, it requires board approval? Mm-hmm. With the federal programs, what is that requirement?
So on the federal program, great question. Thank you for that. On the federal program side, I just need them to hear me online. On the federal program side, the grant side, it doesn't get into the specifics of that. What it does say is it talks about the expenditures and how you spend the money and when you spend the money. So as far as those are local policies that are going to need to be determined. Now, as far as, like, if I'm understanding your question correctly, mm-hmm. the only thing that I have seen on statute is that your campus improvement plan, your district improvement plan, which has those expenditures, federal expenditures built into them, those have to be approved by the board. Mm-hmm. Those have to be board approved. And that's actually state statute, not federal statute.
This is very recent. It came to us through TASB.
Yeah, it's actually not. It's not very, if you're talking about posting online and all of that, That's not very recent. That's been around for quite a while, for the last couple of years. Now, has it been
For us, it barely got
more
approved.
implemented and they're talking about it more now? Yes, for sure. It's been on the books for a number of years. I want to say back to 2018. And I could be wrong on that date, but it's been there for a while. And you're supposed to put, how much,
The
what
award that you're accepting.
the award is, what the amount is there any feedback? Is there
They have
any?
to be on our board agenda
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Like, so we must inform the board about it. We weren't before. We didn't know it was required. And then we also have to now post them on our school website. So we've created a page just for federal programs now where we can publish the NOGA, I guess, the NOGA cover page that
Yeah,
you
what
get
a lot of
you
people
get the
are using
award.
that NOGA with the 6100 and the amounts.
But then how does
Not
all
by
that
by
translate?
like all the sub object codes, but certainly by those big buckets.
Right.
Again, I just, on regards to that local policy from TASB, I believe, I'm not the expert, but I believe it has to do more with clarification when ESSER funds started coming up 2, 3 years
Yes.
ago, where it requires, if you receive a federal grant, it requires for you to get input from different stakeholders, community, parents, and for you to have meetings as to how you're going to use those funds, and then take it to the board for approval, kind of what we did with ESSER 1, ESSER 2, ESSER 3. Doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be approved by the budget with the local budget with the M&O. It's just that you take it to the board and the board approves how you're going to use those funds. And then you know how every 6 months we're supposed to meet with the stakeholders, and every 6 months we're supposed to update it on the website. I believe that TASB local policy that you're referring to deals with that part. That's, well, any federal. Now it says any federal grant. So any new grants that you receive or any additional grants that we receive, we have to get that engagement, follow the same procedure and policy similar, getting engagement with the stakeholders, get input, have meetings, take it to the board, explain to the board, this is how we're gonna use the grant, and then get board approval. But that doesn't mean it has to be included in your local budget.
And well, what I was speaking about was posting your grant amounts like to the public. That has been a requirement. Now, as far as stakeholder engagement goes, it's very important, but it varies by grant program. And that's the tough thing, is that with your Title I Part A program, when you have the stakeholder engagement, well, that is the campus or SBDM. That is your district improvement plan committee, which you're supposed to have parents on there, and that's parents plural. ESSER was very different because that was like the whole community.
Correct.
Title I Part A ESSER programs didn't do that. Title II has its own requirements. So I don't want to belabor the point, but yes, those but as far as when board approved,
Yes.
how board approved,
Correct.
the federal statute does not get into that level of detail.
Okay, so there isn't any existing guidance on that.
Not to
Every
the
district's gonna kind of
yeah,
do their
not
own.
to the level of detail. There is state guidance, but I'm only talking about federal guidance right now.
And then ongoing amendments. Because like right now, when we need to move from function to function, we take it to the board for approval. So going forward on the federal programs, we move those as needed without board approval. Are y'all taking yours to the board? And not in the future either?
Yeah, and it's more so a local decision where the federal gets involved. It sounds real official, right? Where on the federal side is that 25%, everything I just showed you, 25%. It's how TEA as the pass-through agency is determining the federal funds. 25% is in a sub-object or object code that is not previously budgeted for.
I just want to add, I know that you had mentioned board approval. You're right, as far as after ESSER, they made us require any application. Like if we have an intent to apply, an intent, you don't have to get board approval, but you have to make them aware that you're applying for it. So what we have in our district is we have an Excel sheet and because you're constantly applying now with all the opportunities, right? So the use of funds, the amount to be determined, or if they have a direct link, and then we summarize the program, and then our directors will go up there and present. But it's just a report regarding an intent to apply. And then that's all we do. We do not take them to board for any function of budget amendments or things like that. That we don't do.
No, to do that, that would be. I can't imagine functioning as an organization if I had to take every little amendment to the board. I don't know. Any other questions?
One, this is great discussion.
I'll just add one thing, and this is not on the list. So just now that I have you, and I have the microphone, so you're gonna listen to what I have to say. No, just kidding. Is every year you'll some social media or some media outlet will publish Title I, such and such district to get $7 more million of Title I monies or something like that. Okay. Or, so and so senator or somebody will make an announcement about that, and we get flooded with calls. Okay. So one of the things I want you to understand is TEA is the pass-through agency. So when those federal monies come through, they don't go to you directly from the Department of Education. They go to TEA. TEA has their reservations. TEA has their costs. Then based off of census data, based off of their calculations and formulas, then the money goes to you. So, like if you're superintendent, they read that article, or someone in the community reads that article and they get very excited, and they're going to see, hey, we're getting $20 more million. Maybe that's an exaggeration. I've fielded calls like that before. It doesn't work that way. Okay, so what I would just urge you is you're not going to make local decisions based off of a news article. Okay. Is anyone aware of what I'm saying? Has anyone gotten those articles and you get excited? The community gets a hold of it. And how are you going to spend the money? And does that mean we can buy this? And does that mean you can buy that? Well, TEA, and I'm just giving you some talking points, is that TEA is the pass-through agency. We get our allocations. We will find out late spring, early summer. That's when we actually find out how much we're going to get. That number comes from the Texas Education Agency. So just to help, I'm trying to say it to help you out, to give you some talking points also as you communicate that if anyone comes to you in the community. All right,
Okay.
thank you.